nurse called me the baby maker years ago, and I wanted to have that as my license plate, but they said it was too obscene, you know, and I was like, that's really what I do. I make babies. I get people pregnant. I make babies. That's just what I do. Cool. Oh, there you go, kicking.
Yeah.
Dr. Julian Escobar is one of the leading fertility doctors in the United States.
Want to know about ovaries and eggs, probably the most important, tubes, uterus, and sperm. We can optimize everything. We can make the woman ovulate better, perhaps more than 1 egg a month, so she's super fertile. Plus, we can make the guy more fertile by putting more sperm up in the uterus, and that's what artificial insemination is, which is just kind of giving the sperm a lift. And then you here have a huge placenta. It's gorgeous. What I want to get out of them is, what is the family you're trying to build? And then I can give you the information of how to build that family, and those are just technologies for a means to an end.
One possible fertility treatment is in vitro fertilization, or IVF. IVF makes it possible to remove eggs from the mother or an egg donor, fertilize them with the sperm from the father or sperm donor, and place the embryo into the uterus of a woman or surrogate for it to grow and develop. The surrogate then carries the baby until birth. They don't have any genetic ties to the child because it wasn't their egg that was used.
So you'd have to take those eggs outside of the body, fertilize them outside of the body in a safe place, because we'll make sure that every egg meets the sperm, and actually we can even inject the sperm into the egg.
But concern in the fertility field is growing around the impact of new abortion laws in Texas. Following the Supreme Court decision to overturn Roe v. Wade, the state of Texas moved to ban abortion. It is now a first-degree felony, punishable by up to life in prison. Although fertility treatment was not the primary focus for the new legislation, it has brought confusion to the medical field.
So even though what I do is exactly the opposite of abortion, if the government limits reproductive choice on one end of the spectrum, people don't realize that it completely affects the other side as well.
Shana Caceres is a fertility lawyer in Texas.
As we've seen abortion laws and regulations tighten, the fear aspect has only increased.
Millions of people require fertility treatment. According to the Mayo Clinic, 15% of couples may need reproductive technology. Couples from around the world utilize the expertise and the options that are available at clinics like this one. A match between a couple and the surrogate will focus on key questions, not least whether they would agree to abort a pregnancy if there are clear complications, either for the surrogate or for the baby, by continuing. But because of the new abortion laws, Caceres fears that potential surrogates are more likely to think twice about undertaking the process.
Our goal is to help this family grow, but at the same time, that surrogate, she has children at home, children who are accounting for her, to come home every day and to come home from that delivery.
That point is echoed by Sunday Crider, a former embryologist and founder of the Surrogacy Concerns, an organization that helps match potential parents with surrogates.
We discuss a number of what we call our matching preferences. So it might be, how do you feel about vaccines? Or are you comfortable with one embryo or two embryos? Very important things, but probably one of the most important conversations that we would have with them is, how do you feel about termination in the event that there is something significantly wrong with the baby?
Any given risk in pregnancy is that there is going to be an abortion whether the parties want to or not. And we try to avoid that at any cost. Sometimes things happen. The
point in the pregnancy where most people get a complete evaluation of the fetus is not until 18 to 20 weeks, because that's when the organs have formed. So most people will not know that the baby comes with a problem like no brain or no skull or the lungs didn't develop or there's no kidneys. So all these things are incompatible with life. One of the options is to just terminate the pregnancy at that point.
In Texas, it's now illegal to get a termination. So there can be no mention of that in contracts. We really can't mention that to our parties. So the question becomes, should a surrogate become pregnant with a baby that is anencephalic or has Potter's syndrome and has no kidneys and has no chance to survive outside of the womb, but it still has a heartbeat within the womb? What are these families to do? And in Texas, the only option is that the surrogate would have to carry the baby to term.
In that situation, having to wait for someone to be near death so that you can step in, because if you step in a moment too soon, you're liable.
It's almost like you need to let your patient be on the cusp of death to be able to help her.
I think some parents have put their fertility journeys on hold because, you know, what happens? What happens if something goes wrong? And we don't have an answer for that.
The people who are mostly impacted are the surrogates because they have to take that risk that there is a higher chance due to the current state of events that I will die helping someone else create their dream of having a child.
Alpi and Mitesh Prajapati know all too well about the painful journey of having a complicated pregnancy.
We got to 18 weeks and I woke up that morning and I felt really bad. I was subsequently diagnosed with very early onset preeclampsia. We ended up delivering on 25 weeks and 3 days, and she came out very, tiny.
There was a chance that our little girl, Rhea, would not make it out of the delivery room, but she had the will to fight.
She started having some breathing issues again, ultimately was diagnosed with pulmonary hypertension, which affects premature babies. Her health just deteriorated because of all the prematurity issues that she had.
Nearly 4 months after her premature birth, Rhea passed away. It left Alpi and Mitesh devastated, but they also remain grateful that they had the opportunity to discuss their options with medical professionals following that early preeclampsia diagnosis.
I was very thankful, when we were in the hospital and we were able to have those frank conversations with our physician. When I look back to 22 or 23 weeks, with this new legislation that is now into effect, I think that is a crucial time, right, for us to have those conversations. And we had the ability to have those conversations with our physicians that, someone, if they were in that situation today, this might be something that the physicians are apprehensive to maybe talk about, or the patients, may not know if they are able to talk about these things.
It was a very intimate conversation between that patient provider. Now, I don't know what that looks like right now. I can see that conversation be very difficult, for a patient, patient or provider, because there's this legal implication, behind it. Patients are thinking of their health, but then they're also thinking, hey, if I make a decision, am I going to have to go to jail?
Alpi and Mitesh also believe a key impact will be a reduction in the number of surrogates willing to come forward.
There's a larger number of intended parents and there's a lower number of surrogates, right? So it's already very hard to find a surrogate if you are looking for one. I think that this new legislation is definitely going to make that number go down because these surrogates are women. They have families of their own. They have kids of their own.
There's going to be a drop off in a number of surrogates. I think women won't sign up for being a surrogate just because of this law. That's really hard to swallow, just because that just doesn't allow somebody to have a family.
Hey, Melba. Good, thank you so much. Hello, Vicky. How are you doing?
Another concern for workers in the fertility field is the issue of when life begins. Is it at fertilization or conception? The new ban in Texas defines an unborn child as an individual living member from fertilization until birth, including the embryonic and fetal stages of development.
There was no carve-out for IVF. So when you have personhood being defined as the moment a sperm penetrates the shell of an egg, I mean, we've got hundreds of thousands of embryos in cryo storage that, you know, what if you thaw them out and they don't survive? Is that a personhood issue? Now they're saying, oh, well, the intent wasn't to include IVF embryos, but was it? It's not explicitly laid out.
For the poor embryologist who slips and falls, is that negligent manslaughter? The impact we're going to see on this, even if these laws were changed now, is going to haunt us for generations.
Well, most embryos die in the lab. I mean, that's just what happens in nature. You know, like you start like this, number of eggs, number of mature eggs, number of fertilized eggs that get to day 5, in embryos, and then embryos that are chromosomally normal, and a fraction of those will get pregnant, maybe 70% will get, and then some will miscarry, and so it's a pyramid. And so if those embryos going in the lab are considered as persons, as people, and if them dying is like homicide, then how can you practice embryology? How can you help these patients?
Abortion remains a divisive issue. At a recent March for Life rally in Washington, D.C., House Speaker Mike Johnson vowed to keep working until abortion is eliminated in the U.S.
My friends, let's be encouraged, let's press on in hope, and that we can join together and make this great difference. I believe that we can. We can stand with every woman for every child, and we can truly build a culture that cherishes and protects life.
It's all about control. My choice.
While on the other side, pro-choice campaigners are also continuing to make their voices heard. But the impact of the new abortion laws in Texas was highlighted in December last year. Kate Cox, a Dallas mother of 2, learned that she had a non-viable pregnancy she would need to terminate. Doctors told her it was unlikely that anyone in Texas could carry out an abortion. Although the Texas law has exceptions for a life-threatening physical condition, the guidance lacks clarity, so few doctors are willing to risk imprisonment or a heavy fine to carry out an abortion. Cox eventually left the state to get an abortion. 2 attorneys have now filed a petition seeking clarity from the Texas Medical Board as to what qualifies as a medical exception.
The Texas law is written very vaguely. There was no exception. There was no exception in there of, oh, the baby hasn't formed properly, or oh, you've been raped, or oh, you know, it's not going to be survivable. And I think that was a big misconception with a lot of people, that they thought, oh, surely there's exceptions for medical reasons. The only exception that's in there is if the mother's life is at risk, or the surrogate, the woman who's carrying the baby. And who's going to make that determination? Is it the doctor? Does the doctor get to make that? Is it critical that it be done right now, or do they have to wait and see if it gets worse?
These laws are so incredibly difficult because they are so gray. We will not know until people are prosecuted. And so for those people who are in that gray space, this is going to ruin your life. You could lose your reproductive organs. That's your only dream of becoming a parent, and you could go to jail.
I hope these things get reworked, but I ultimately, of course, think that this is best to decide between the patient and their physician. And but if their laws are going to be written, they need to be written much more clearly, because it's only going to lead to more suffering and people dying.